And we will now start with the afternoon session, which is called The Role of France and Germany in Driving the Energy Transition Towards in Europe. I'm very glad that we have four very eloquent speakers. And before starting with the format and the questions, I'd like to hand over to our host, which is Dr. Christiane Averbeck from Klimaallianz Germany, who organized the event together with the Réseau Action Climat from France.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. Thank you for having us. Thank you to all of you of coming here to this event. Actually, we are very excited that France and Germany are working together. Yes, we are working together. We are working together on the energy transition. We are working together on the Energiewende, on the Transition, Energie. Yes, Energie. So I think we have to hear that more often, you know, the French and the German version of it. And we are totally excited as civil society organizations that it was possible to bring this person, the Staatssekretär Jochen Flasbarth of the, how's it in English, the Ministry of Environment. Is that okay? Yes. And Brune Poirson, the State Secretary for Environment in France, together here to have them, the two of them here on the panel. And we want to talk to them about this initiative that Germany and France started. But we want to do that not only with the two people here on the panel, with Lutz Weischer from German Watch and Neil Makarov from Réseau, Climat in France, RAC France. We also want to do that with you. And yeah, what do we want to do? We want to have some questions that will guide us through this event. We want to talk about how can we strengthen the French and German partnership in order to drive the energy transition in Europe. And we have actually three leading topics. That is how France and Germany can together support a meaningful carbon price in Europe. Then as a second question, what are France and Germany's plans to phase out fossil subsidies, which are undermining climate efforts? And thirdly, we want to discuss what is the energy and climate horizon in Europe for 2050. And actually, as I said, I welcome you all. I heard, Madame Poisson, that you, up to now, you didn't interact with civil society not that much, as you are new in your position. No, as
I like the second part of the sentence.
Yeah. No, and we are very hopeful that this is just the beginning, and we want more sort of interaction with you, with the German government on this topic. So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Christiane. Yeah, my name is Dominic Sarnt from Revolutionary Ideas, and I run this session with somebody you don't know yet, who may stand up, which is Johanna Baumann from Graphic Recording. And if we could switch to graphic recording now, you see the format of what is going to happen. So, you know that here you are in the Talanoa space. It's run by Fiji and Germany. And as a young student, I've been part of a student exchange ship with Evian-les-Bains, which was very helpful for me to get to know France and made my grades much better in the next year. And in the last week, I was able to work with several people from Fiji, which was an equally amazing experience. And we now try to work with that concept of Talanoa, which can be summarized in 4 words, which is respect, so that we really listen to another before we form our own thoughts. The second is controversy, that we may disagree, and that disagreement is important initially to show where we stand. The third is participation, that not just the 4 here will speak, but that you are very much invited to come on stage later on. And the fourth is uniting, So after having had the controversy, we will show what we ask each other in order to perform joint action. And if we can leave this Talanoa space after 1 hour with a moment of, with a feeling of inspiration and motivation, then very much can be achieved. Yes, we'll start with 2 keynotes by Madame Poirson and Jochen Flasbarth, and they promised me that together they will not take longer than 15 minutes. So it's a team effort. And afterwards, we'll have a response by the 2 representatives of the German and French umbrella organizations from the NGO scene, which takes 5 to 10 minutes. And after that, we'll have a short discussion here and then invite you in the manner of a fishbowl format to take this free space, and later on, when Mr. Flasbarth and Madame Poisson have to leave at something like 10 to 6, you will also be invited to take on the other chairs here. Good. Let us start. And if there are also some non-European perspectives, we very much invite them to speak out afterwards, because for us, we know each other quite well, but it would be very interesting also to see how non-European citizens and actors look at the German-French initiatives. So much for the beginning. I kindly invite Ms. Poisson to the, you can either stay seated or
No.
you're invited also to take the standing table.
I fill it up.
Okay, and the guiding questions are, well, what has been the idea behind the German-French initiative that you launched this summer, and what's been the progress made so far from your perspective? Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. First of all, and I really do mean it, it's a really important moment of my day for 2 reasons. Not by order of importance. First is because I'm sitting here with you, Jochen, and we've done, I can't help it, I'm French. Because, we've been working as much as we can together over the past few months. And it's been really a key focus of my work, working more with Germany. I think we have a lot to learn from each other, and I think we also have a special responsibility to push and be as ambitious as we can. And the second reason why I'm very pleased to be here is also because I have the opportunity to interact even more with the civil society. I really feel that you have a special responsibility as well, which is one of pushing us, the policymakers, of being always more and more ambitious. We need you to keep us accountable and really make sure that we do our work well. And we also need you because sometimes when we try to be ambitious within our own government, we need advocates outside our government to help us push our agenda internally. Anyway, but that was the introduction. Let me get into really the nitty-gritty of the conversation. So as I've just mentioned, we, France and Germany, clearly share a common climate ambition. We want to meet carbon neutrality as early as we can, as soon as possible. We both know, and very deeply, and we have deep convictions that the transition is desirable. We will all be better off in a 2-degree world. This is obvious, but I think now what we're trying to push is really implementation of that goal. This is why we both signed the Paris Agreement, but now we're working hard on its implementation. Importantly, what we know and what we are aware of is that in a 2-degree world, there is no room for fossil fuel. Again, this sounds really obvious, but doing it is really hard, and this is what we try and do. But it means that we're facing a huge challenge, absolutely massive, which is phasing out coal plants in the electric sector. We still have plants in France, and we are planning on really closing them down, basically, by 2022. And then slowly, we also want to phase out thermic vehicles, and we want to really decarbonize the entire economy. That's also why we're doing a lot of work and pioneering work on green finance as well. But we won't be able to to do that alone. We know that we need to do that very closely with Germany, and that we need a European plan that is as ambitious as we can. In this transition, we know that there will be winners and losers, obviously. And losers will be very vocal, and they already are, because they will resist the transition. But we think that there are basically two ways. The way we view, and I think we share the same vision, but the way we view meeting carbon neutrality, we could do that two ways. First, by imposing a regulatory phasing out, basically regulation. We decide, and we just decide that we want to make it happen, or by using economic incentives, such as, for example, carbon pricing. The former one is very tempting. You think that by setting a regulation, you can just basically achieve a lot, and that if you're ambitious, you also can communicate on that, and it makes everybody feels good. The latter solution, which is using economic incentives, is actually, it sounds more theoretical when we talk about it just right now, but we believe that it's more attractive because it minimizes the cost of the transition, because first, we sort of eliminate the most polluting power plants, and then the less efficient carbon-intensive technologies. And we believe that this is how it should be done, by really using incentives rather than top-down regulatory policies that we believe are not enough. This is why we are very actively supporting the introduction of carbon prices, both internationally and also at the European level. And I know that when I went to Germany in September for a full day of work, this was a central topic of our discussions. As you know, our president declared last September in an important, what we feel is a really important vision for Europe, that a significant carbon floor price was needed to ensure that Europe will actually move towards a low-carbon economy. We also believe that we need a common initiative which is focused on the introduction of a carbon floor price for electric generation, because we think that it could clearly lead to a reduction in CO2 emissions. We believe that this will provide the revenues that we need to sort of close our power plants, be it fossil fuel-based power plants, but also slowly our nuclear power plants as well. So reaching a European agreement on such a carbon price floor seems to be, in the short term, almost undoable and unattainable. But given the positions of our countries in Europe, this is why it would make a lot of sense to start with a coordinating Franco-German initiative and joint work. We feel it's our responsibility, our joint responsibility, to find ways not only to raise ambitions, but also to implement it. And we think that by working on a common carbon floor price, it could be a first step, which is ambitious as well. And then slowly we feel that if we are moving ahead, then slowly we can have other European countries join. And this is really how we think that now we need to move forward. Obviously, such an initiative would give a competitive advantage to a low carbon electricity, including nuclear electricity, but it would also lead to a significant reduction in the need for public support for renewable energy as well, because it would yield additional revenues to finance the energy transition. This is the rationale behind what we are pushing, really. I understand that I've already been speaking too long. I don't want to take up too much of the...
Perfect.
Okay.
7.5 minutes.
7.5. Okay, perfect. So I know that now, just to close down the discussion, I know that now it's really hard to make a decision, and I know we've been working together a lot, but we hope that this is the beginning of the discussion, or not the beginning, but that we'll keep talking about that in the future, and I look forward to this open discussion with all of you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, just one short word. Could we just switch off the graphic recording for the next 10 minutes and then switch it on again. Thank you. We have our full attention to you, and afterwards we'll see what the graphic recorder does with it.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I just want to echo what Brune said. It's also really a pleasure to be with you here. And so everything you said is the same as I would have said it, because we share these views. And just to start with France and Germany, I think this is not new. We really have a wonderful relationship with two of our countries. And sometimes looking at Europe, it strikes me that if we would have put as much energy into building up the relationship with our Eastern country partners, we might be in a different situation. Learning from the French-German relationship is really to start with the young people, to do it intensively and constantly. And so we are very lucky for this special French-German relationship. And having said that it is new, not new, well, this is wrong in a way, because it is new the way, especially France is doing it with the new government under President Macron, with you as our counterparts, Minister Hulot, and we really entered a different stage. And I have just two examples before I come to this one. Is when I visited on invitation of Laurent Fabius, now the president of your General Court, at the Sorbonne, the meeting about a global environment contract, I really saw this new spirit in the French society, pushing away all the obstacles and really focusing on how a better world could look like. And same with the relationship between our countries. And one example is a workshop, the one-day's workshop we had. Usually, I mean, we all know that when politicians come together, they have a 20-minute talk, half-an-hour talk, and they are sometimes reading out the speaking notes, and then it's over. And this honestly doesn't make sense if you really want to bring something forward. And that is what we did. We went through the whole agenda. We know that we will have constantly meeting in that format. Energy obviously is one of the key priorities for our two countries. And in a way, it's quite simple. And you mentioned it, Brune. If you want to achieve the Paris targets, then we have to decarbonize key industrialized countries by 2050 already. And the other one, the emerging economies, will follow up in the following decades, but also during this century. So how to make this happen? We need to get the energy sector decarbonized. For Germany, this means, I'm sure, regardless how the detailed views of the new government will be, this is a renewable one. We excluded nuclear, and I doubt that CCS for the energy sectors and CCU will be of relevance, maybe for other parts in industry. So this is a renewable track. We know that this is only doable if we phase out coal at the same time. A bit easier for France to do than for us, because we still have quite a big share. We know that we started late. It's one of the hot potatoes of the incoming new government, because we are still sitting on a broad coal power plant park, and as we started late, it's now really a big thing to do for the new government. Regarding the prices, I'm quite sure that the emission trading system, which we just reformed, by the way, in a better way than I thought at the beginning of that, with the help of France, but also other countries like Sweden, very helpful with very positive inputs, and others. We will see increasing prices. It will be more robust. We have a number of details. We can talk about it later on, and I see experts from NGOs around here. They will come up with different statements, so we can get into that later on. But on one thing I'm quite sure, we will not see prices high enough for a fuel switch. So it will not be enough to switch from lignite or hard coal to gas or even renewable. So this has to be done additionally. And I think the very good provision in the reform is now that we can compensate on a national level what we do additionally in our energy policy, which was not the case so far. So if, for example, in Germany we will go to phase out some of our, or more urgently, our coal power plants, then we can compensate it with deleting emission trading certificates. That can be linked to the minimum price. I know that France was in favor. In Germany, it was a bit different. May I say so, Dirk Weinreich, the working level in my ministry was completely against it, because it's a target-driven, quantity-driven approach. I had the feeling that what we have, that a minimum price could send the right signal. But let's be realistic. Now we have the reform. It's not in the reform. Let's don't waste time on that one, because the momentum is yet not there, and I'm sure we wouldn't have had a majority even if Germany would have more aggressively been on the side of France on that one. So when we talk now about prices, I think we should focus on these parts, those parts where we are outside this ETS, and that is taxes on fuels. So having a look at the traffic and transport sector and at the heating, because there we are outside the ETS and looking at the very, very low prices. And now I'm, Madame Weisgerber, I'm speaking more like an advisor because I'm outgoing. I'm outgoing, but with these low prices, we will have huge difficulties to make installation of housing, also the switch in traffic and transport, a business case. So then you always have to subsidize against the wrong market signal. Is that already 1 minute? Okay. And that perfectly fits also to the subsidies issue, because my point is we have to work on the taxes, and we have to work on the perverse subsidies at the same time. But I'm absolutely convinced, at least in our country, this will not be doable if we focus just on the environmental linked taxes. We have to include it in a broader tax reform, because whatever indirect tax system you use, it always has also the effect that it is socially not balanced. So if you want to go this way, you have to make it a broader tax reform approach, where at the same time you address perverse subsidies, new incentives for less carbon intensity in traffic, transport and housing, and at the same time make it more social justice. So you have to look at other parts of the system as well. Point.
Fine. Well, thank you very much. Let's change the perspective and look what our friends from the NGO side have prepared for today's session, and how they see points that they support, where they want to challenge you, and where there might even be open controversy. You have 6 to 8 minutes together. Is that doable?
That's doable.
Okay.
So first, I must say that we are very glad to be here with you, because obviously you are working together, but we are also working together as NGOs in France and in Germany. We are a partnership, but also a friendship in both sides, in both countries. And we decided to work together and to publish a joint letter addressed to Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron today, to place climate action at the heart of their French and German partnership. And I think you already mentioned it, but it's very important for us, because we think today it's the right time. After the election in France, after the election in Germany, it's a time also to renew the climate ambition in France and Germany, but also in Europe, because there are new opportunities in France and Germany, but also in Europe. And just to remind you that the European Union is the one we pledge at the international level for all the member states. So if you really want to increase and to implement the Paris Agreement, then we also need to raise the ambition at the European level. So together, France and Germany. However, today we all know here that the EU is completely out of the track of the Paris Agreement. I must disagree with you. I think the ETS reform in that regard is not a very good reform because it's not going to support a significant carbon price. There are a lot of loopholes and flexibilities here. And also, it allows some fundings to coal power plants in some member states, not in all. I know that France and Germany pushed a bit to limit this flexibility, but it's still a not so good reform. And for us, it's a very bad signal sent at the same time as the COP23, because we know that it's not going to support a significant carbon price. Therefore, in the letter, we decided to call on France and Germany to be the driving force of an ambitious climate action in Europe. This is important that Germany and France adopt a common goal for 2050. France already announced that they are going to elaborate a carbon neutrality plan strategy for 2050. It would be great if Germany could join also this club. I know that Portugal announced a similar issue, a similar announcement. And it's also vital that the two countries are pushing together the EU to adopt a carbon neutrality roadmap before COP24. Not to adopt, but at least to draft a roadmap before the COP24 next year, because it would send a very positive signal on the international scene. And for us, it's very important to have this long-term perspective. And with a long-term perspective, it also means that we need to raise the ambition in the short-term perspective. And here, France and Germany should really engage in the discussion at the EU level on the energy package to raise the ambition of the targets for renewables, for energy efficiency at the European level. Because the energy package is going to define our energy policy in Europe for the next 10 years. So it's something extremely important and vital for Europe and for France and Germany, obviously. Where the EU is not ambitious enough, I think we can agree here that France and Germany should take a leading role, should show leadership and pave the way for an effective energy transition. I mentioned the missed opportunity of the reform of the carbon market. Here, again, France and Germany, with other member states, like the Netherlands, could, for example, adopt complementary measures, the carbon floor price, but not only carbon floor price, because here we are also very keen to see a strong national plan to phase out fossil energies and not only economic incentives, because we do think it's not enough to really phase out fossil energies. And my last point, because before giving you the floor, is that we need, if France and Germany wants to have some credibility at the EU level and at the global level, we need also to walk the talk at the national level, at the domestic level. And we don't want any political backtracking here. So we need to restore the confidence by shifting from statements to actions. And this is something we are very keen to see in the coming months in France, for my side, and I suppose in Germany also. And so with the French and German letter to President Macron and Angela Merkel, we wanted to send a united and strong signal that we all want France and Germany to be the driving force for the energy transition in Europe, because France and Germany are two big countries, and we don't want to postpone the efforts for climate actions after 2020. We want it now.
Thank you. Let me just add that I'm also very happy, also personally, to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Franco-German relationship, of the idea of Franco-German partnership, also because I live in one. My wife is French. I studied in France. The idea of close cooperation between Germany and France is close to my heart. I wanted to talk about two things, Europe and money. On Europe, one of the ideas we had when drafting this letter is that actually this is not just about having better climate policy in France and in Germany, it's an opportunity to strengthen European cooperation as well. The sort of German-French motor for European integration has often played a strong role. And this is an opportunity that we now have with two new governments, or one new government and one incoming at some point in the future, probably, in my country. We will have this opportunity to have sort of a new boost that will also be a boost for European cooperation, a common vision, common projects that can take Europe further. This German-French cooperation should therefore be in a spirit of partnership, and of course should be open to other European partners who want to participate and who want to come along. In the experience of German Watch's work, in numerous European countries with different partners, we very often hear how much smaller European countries also, or climate experts and the broader public in smaller European countries also look to what's happening in the big countries, look to what's happening in Germany and France. We've heard that from colleagues in Croatia, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, other countries repeatedly. So doing more in German-French cooperation and at home can have impact on policy in those countries, and then directly and indirectly in Brussels as well. As several people here have already said, if necessary, however, it's of course also a good idea to do things in a smaller group, not wait for consensus amongst 28, take the initiative to go further faster together or with a club of frontrunners. Some specific examples beyond what Neil already said related to the second topic, money. So at the last German-French summit in July, you decided there's a joint commitment by both governments to modernize environmental taxation. And I think that's really something we're very happy to see this announcement and look forward to concrete actions by our two governments. And that would include a reform of fossil fuel subsidies that both of our countries still have and that are counterproductive for the transition, of course. It would also include the idea of a carbon floor price. We are convinced that that's something both countries can drive together, also in the ETS sectors. I mean, there's other examples, such as the UK, where you have a floor price in the electricity sector that is designed in a way that's complementary to the ETS. And Germany and France should have something similar in a joint initiative with other Europeans who want to participate. Money related also is the EU budget. Germany and Europe should work together for a EU budget in 2021 to 2028 that's fully aligned with climate goals. Investment, I think this is actually where this idea that this can really drive Europe and European unity and make Europe stronger is really core. There could be Germany and France should be pushing a common investment agenda in decarbonizing industry and innovation in low-carbon transport networks across Europe. That would really also be a boost, could create perspectives in southern and eastern European member states that are in need of new economic perspectives. So an investment agenda is key. And the final point related to money, and also the final point of my intervention, Germany and France could also work together to align financial markets, to reform the financial markets so that they're better aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. France has already taken first steps, is a frontrunner in some regards with the obligation for investors to disclose carbon risk. I think my own country should have similar rules. And I think both countries should take the next step together of defining what is actually meant by disclosing your climate risk. And under the German presidency in the G20, industry-led task force on climate-related financial disclosure actually developed recommendations how you could make your climate risk and your emissions public as investors and as large companies, and that would be something both countries could commit to implementing together and making mandatory over the medium term.
Okay, thank you very much. May I ask you, do you still have a few minutes, or when do you have to get to the next event? Okay, nobody, 2 minutes? So I suggest we change to the graphic recording and also open the debate to the fishbowl format. If we get the whole screen, please. Who of you has already participated in a fishbowl session? Okay, some. So you may be the front runners. The idea is that there's one free chair, and the person who wants to make a statement, a short statement, and ask a question can just come here, sit here, engage, and if somebody else comes and queues up here, that person will leave after the question, and the next person will sit here. And if somebody else should leave the panel, another person can come. Okay? So we have at least time for 2 questions to Madame Poirson and Mr. Flasbarth, and this chair is yours. Be courageous. Come. And take your time to introduce yourself, please. Have a seat.
Hello, Christian Miel, Spanisch, the Klimaretter. A question to the 2 secretaries of state. I understand in France you would like to see to have a minimum price for the electricity sector, which is already covered by the ETS, and in Germany you would like to have a minimum price for all things which are outside of the ETS. So I have 2 questions. First of all, can you explain me where the overlap between these two positions is? And secondly, economists would say the ideal minimum floor price would go across all sectors and would be the same for electricity, farming, etc. So why limit yourself to one sector in France and to the other sectors in Germany? Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall I go ahead?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I think the good one is then whenever a country now inside the EU decides to go in their own country for a floor price, then it is doable in a way that it fits to the European emission trading system, which was definitely not the case in Britain. I just told it my colleagues there. It's an easy piece to say, okay, we go for a floor price, especially as I'm talking now about UK and not about France, I can say it, especially if you have such a high degree of nuclear. But if you do it on your own without deleting emissions, this is really not a fair way to do it in Europe. It's an easy piece, and you will not change anything because it's even damaging the European trading system because the price is going down. Now we have everything in place that if a country like France maybe, or others, or maybe Germany would say, okay, also for the electricity sector we go for a minimum price, then of course it has to be accompanied with deleting additional emissions. So now, why not doing it? Why not including all the other sectors into the ETS? I think that's a translation of your question. There were some attempts, for example, from the car industry, and sometimes you look who is requesting what to get it sorted. A carbon price or an inclusion of the the traffic sector into the ETS would leave the traffic sector stuck in where they are, because the price signal would be so low on fuels that this would not change anything. That is why we said at this time, maybe it's different in the 30s, might be an interesting idea at that time, but definitely not at the time being. Can I just also say just a few words to what has been mentioned? Don't make the ETS reform worse than it is. And the coal slide, it sounds like that there is a big loophole for coal. It is not. It is for the poorest countries in Europe. I think it's Bulgaria and Romania. Is that right? And it's limited to a very, very small slide. So it's even not Poland. And they accepted it. And I tell you, apart from our very, very good friendship, we have to ensure that other big countries and also small countries are not felt cornered. We have to work on that, otherwise we cannot get this Europe organized.
Okay.
I know Jochen, you have to go, so I don't want to feel like you have to stay to because
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's give us an applause. You have to leave now too, or?
soon.
Okay.
Very
Let's give us one applause to Jochen Flasbarth. Thank you very much.
I'll just be very quick because I think, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, frankly speaking, we really share the same approach and the same view. By wanting always more, you can actually achieve less. And listen, I'm not lacking ambition. I'm just saying, if you really want to be ambitious, you need to be realistic at some point. And being realistic is bringing countries together and stakeholders. And sometimes you have to do it step by step. And this is exactly what happened, for example, with ETS. And I understand, and I'm really pleased that you're pushing us, and please keep doing that, because we need you to push us so that we never sort of fall asleep on so thank you, but I'm also saying by wanting always more, sometimes you can do less. Anyway, but just very quickly, perhaps to respond to what you said. Thank you for this letter to our respective our respective leaders. I think this is great. I think this is the right time. I think this is what we need when we talk about, you know, rebuilding Europe. We need the environment to be absolutely critical and really central to the rebuilding and the refoundation of Europe. If we don't put it at the center of our work and even of our political ambition, we won't achieve a third of what we want to do at the European level, just as a union, and so we need the environment more than ever. And thank you for writing to our leaders. I think this was the right timing and exactly what we need. Also, you mentioned that you want us to work together. Rest assured that we are already working very closely together. As I mentioned, I went to Germany with, you know, about 30 people from my team and my ministry, and we worked for a full day. And we're going to keep working like this because we feel that there is a special relationship between France and Germany. But as Jochen mentioned, if we want to do more, we also need to include other countries. So rest assured that we are also working and trying to include as many countries as possible. We need to do that more, and we will keep doing it. Perhaps, I mean, you raised so many good points, and I don't want to respond to all of them, because otherwise I'm going to speak for another 15 minutes.
So that's your last.
But perhaps my last minute is just to say that on the financial aspects, we hear your points. We are already pushing for 40% of the EU budget to be sort of under the environment umbrella. It's never enough, but we think it's already a good first step. And yeah, I'll stop there. Okay. I promise. Thank you for pushing us. Keep doing that, but sometimes also acknowledge that we're really doing our best. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So, thank you very much for coming, and I hope that you'll have a good and productive time with small steps to a great objective of this conference. And you're always invited to come back to Talanoa space. Okay, we continue. Let's say thank you and goodbye to Madame Poirson. We have 2 free spaces here. So that's your chance to come on stage and engage also with the 2 NGOs. And it would be great to have a non-European perspective here too. So please feel free to join us. That's participation. Yes. Okay, hi. Take a seat. You take that seat? It's 2 free seats. Do you want to... Okay, you start and then we turn over.
Hi. My name is André Simões. I am professor in Brazil, University of São Paulo, Brazil, in the area of energy planning. My question is... I was expecting to talk with, but you can help me. I think there's a clear connection between energy transition in Europe and energy transition in Latin America. I think in Brazil, now we are beginning to use more and more oil to the transport. I'm very worried about it. What do you think about help us in improving our oil and wind energy, you have a big gap in terms of technology. So the price of wind and solar PV is very expensive nowadays. What do you think about it? This cooperation, international cooperation, and avoid the beginning of use too much oil in our energy systems. Another connection issue connected is the future offering of energy in Brazil is related with inundation of areas in Amazon. So, what opinion about what do you think about it in terms of Europe, Germany, and France cooperation to South America?
Well, I agree with you, I think, that in the sense that I think we have seen that Germany, for example, having ambitious energy transition targets and pushing the Energiewende at some point early in the history of renewable energies in a way, really helped trigger technological innovation and price decline. So what Germany did didn't just have impacts on Germany, but across the world. And likewise, I think if that could be, this approach could be revitalized if Germany and France were to set themselves new ambitious targets for the next phase of the energy revolution. That would, again, most likely trigger innovation, make technologies cheaper, more reliable, better. That would then also benefit to the rest of the world. So I think that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer, of course, is that also direct support to developing countries is necessary in terms of technology, capacity building, finance. In our letter, we also call for an increase in international climate finance, from Germany and France, but also from the EU. Call for a financial transaction tax, which is, unfortunately, she's not here anymore. It's very unfortunate that France has sort of abandoned that, or is not pushing it actively anymore. But I think there's sort of the indirect benefit of us doing more and therefore technologies becoming more widely available, and the direct support that's also a responsibility of developed countries to provide.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to your right.
Hi, my name is Nonti from the Global Eco-Village Network and Revivers of Indigenous Spirituality and Ecosystems. And my question when I come into these platforms, when I hear it's great that the European governments are coming together and they're looking at renewable energy and all these things, but my question is always, when you are strengthening your countries and the NGOs are also involved, which is really great, is there a voice or a research, or do you bring in the table the people that are mostly affected by the fossil fuels, which are the people from the global south, the indigenous people from the countries, the poor countries? Because I think without them, it's only just looking at your countries, but you're not really looking at the problem in the global level. Which are the steps and which are the actions are being taken by these big countries? Because you are the ones that are using more fossil fuels, you're the ones that are affecting more in the global south. So I think this is very important, that how are you including these global south people in your plans for the future? It's actually said that the people have left and the NGO people, it's interesting that the NGOs are the ones that are left behind and the governments have left. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, for example, in Climate Action Network France, we do support, for example, NGOs and the civil society in the French Africa, in order to build capacity and to be able also to advocate for the transition in their countries. So this is also part of our job to think and to also share experiences in the different continents and globally. We can obviously here it's more a European debate, so we wanted to talk about energy transition in Europe, which can obviously also reduce the impact of climate change globally. At least we hope so. But as Lutz mentioned before, there is a very important part of supporting the development and the international solidarity towards the south. And I think a tax on financial transaction at the European level is one of our claims, because we would like to see 100% of this tax to be affected to the global solidarity, the people who are affected the most by climate change and by the impact of climate change, and also helping them to mitigate climate change and to adapt to climate change. And this is one of our demand, political demand, and it's a pity that the ministers are not here still for reacting on that. But of course, we want to think globally and not only at the European level.
One thing I would add, like we also have a lot of partners in the global south and try to bring their voice to Germany, but I think we could do even more of it. Sometimes, we support travel to come here to tell their stories, and through our publications and videos on the web and so on, we try to bring this voice into the German debates, but I think we could do more of it. An idea I had, because you asked specifically how are they involved in the planning, for the German Climate Plan 2050, we had a quite sophisticated engagement process with different societal stakeholders, different groups, different delegate system, and so on. It was pretty impressive, I think. And in future rounds of this planning, I think why not? I mean, if you have a formalized process where we say, we have this number of representatives from industry, from civil society, from the regions, from the municipalities, why should we not have a certain number of representatives from the global south? Because the way how ambitious we are about our climate targets and how we set our climate targets and achieve them has a huge impact, of course, on the most vulnerable people in the south. And giving them a voice in these planning processes, I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Lutz. I think this is we can have a change. The last suggestion is very interesting. I'll be very curious to learn what the reactions will be. But you can tell them that, for example, in this Talanoa space, the atmosphere is often different if you have a Fiji-German cooperation and also style. So are there some more people who want to join the discussion and just comment on what they have heard and ask questions? There are 2 more free chairs for our last round.
And you get a free copy of the letter.
Okay, hi. How is your name?
I'm Irma. I'm from Mexico, actually. So I've previously worked as kind of policymaking, and I've worked with the British government and the Mexican government, and I've seen how it's turned, like the Mexican government is more towards giving to people rather than fixing climate change. So I think this is the general panorama of most of Latin America, and I would like to know if there's some relation here, because I don't know, most people expect that the global north helps global south, so what's the relation in general? Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly, so please feel free to ask again.
Yeah, just how will the path traced by France and Germany help the global south? Yeah. I mean,
and you said that you had the impression that in Mexico, policymaking is much more oriented by social needs,
than
poverty,
global,
than by economic energy aspects.
Yeah, it's kind of a trend in the global south, so.
Yeah, do we have the same trend in Europe?
We do. I think actually one thing that could probably help is to have honest conversations about that, also in spaces like at COPs, to also share like the full set of experiences. I think the German experience is clearly not one where we've always taken decisions that are oriented towards the climate, and where policymakers have not given in to special interests or have been reluctant to take certain decisions because they were worried about the impacts on jobs, for example. So I think it's actually useful to recognize that that's a problem all countries face, and that we have to learn together how to organize a just transition. There's no alternative to this transition, but it has to be organized in a way that would also create benefits for the people, and therefore there doesn't have to be a contradiction. And I think that sort of discussing more in these spaces, and since Paris, where it's been recognized in the preamble of the Paris Agreement, the idea of just transition has become more of a topic here. I think that could help. I don't think it's an area where you could say sort of the global south needs to learn from the global north. We have the same problem, and we all have to learn how to address it better.
Yeah, and if I can just add something very quickly. In our letter to the French and German government, we say that we want the EU budget also to support the just transition, to include more people in the energy transition and not to exclude them, to support the workers, for example, who are going to lose from their job, for example, if a coal power plant is closed down. We need of course, some support because the transition is for everyone. So it's very important for NGOs like us to include more the people and to have like an inclusive transition and fair transition.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks. So I think this topic is actually something that is very close to my heart, and we're doing work with IRENA at the moment, so it's the socioeconomic benefits of large-scale, utility-scale renewable energy projects. So you're definitely right that the Global South has a focus on development of people. And then secondly to that becomes the infrastructure and the economic and how do we uplift, our economies. And I think in South Africa, for instance, the renewable energy program there was highly focused on how do you regulate and how do you put in a policy structure and a procurement program that not only focuses on the technology and the financial capabilities, but also the job creation, skills development, local procurement, local content, and really trying to make private engage with the development goals of the country. So I think what we're doing now is, with IRENA, is we're looking at countries across sub-Saharan Africa and how private is engaging in that, also how governments are starting to engage in that, and what are the metrics that we need to put in place, and how do we create this this conversation and this language, and if it's regulated with policy internally with private or at the government level, to really improve the impact beyond just providing energy and energy provision, if that kind of makes sense. And with gender and so there's this really a momentum that's starting to come behind the projects, especially when you're looking at, okay, now what do we do for the next 20 or 25 years? Not only risk losing the project because we lose our social license to operate, but how do we actually uplift and create development objectives for the country?
So NGOs have been sort of serving as bridges for development?
So as bridges?
Yeah, like platforms to support international governments and...
Yes, so NGOs now and sustainable development professionals are now being uplifted into the conversations because they are the implementation agents, or they're on the ground that are working, and because it's regulated in South Africa that you have to have socioeconomic development, enterprise development plans, that they're bringing these actors into the conversations.
Okay, so maybe you can speak to IRENA and get some clues how to move forward. Okay, let's just stay here. Let's come to the last statements of Neil and Lutz. We've started with the German-French initiative, and I think what's interesting is what's on the agenda for the next month, and what are you going to do to support and also motivate and inspire government agents like Madame Poirson and the next State Secretary and Environmental Minister in Germany. So what's on the agenda of the government and what's on your agenda, and how will it work?
Okay, I think President Macron has been very ambitious in doing many statements. Now we really need him to walk the talk domestically and at the EU level. So we are taking very seriously statements, and we are trying to make him accountable for that. And it's quite important that we are working together with our German friend NGOs because we know that in Germany there are the same process. With the coalition talks, there are a lot of challenges, and it's very interesting that our two governments in the future can work more together on the energy transition. There are unique opportunities today to raise the ambition at the EU level. There is the energy package, which is a big opportunity. So we don't have to postpone the ambition, we can do it now. There is a common agriculture reform policy, which is going to be reformed in the future, which is also a good way to connect with climate change. And the budget, of course, of the EU, which lasts 7 years after 2020. So it's a huge opportunity also to make it more compliant with climate change. And I think here German and French NGOs are clearly working together and pushing our leaders to go in that direction. And we hope they are going to follow our proposal, or at least they are going to hear us and to take the leadership. Let's be ambitious.
Thank you.
Thanks. My chancellor also happens to be very good at making nice statements about climate change. So our two leaders have something in common there. And as far as implementation at home, at the domestic level is concerned, there's also seems to be a common pattern here of now is the time that you really have to follow up with action, your nice words. Germany has supported the agreement amongst the G7 for decarbonization of the global economy. Germany has been a strong driver of the climate, of the Paris Agreement. It's now really the time, and I think this is going to be an absolutely crucial period for the next government, to make sure that we meet our own targets. At this COP, developing countries have every day stressed the importance of action pre-2020, the urgency of the problem. It's not enough to have good targets in the future, in 2030 or 2050. It's important to reach the targets you already have. Germany is currently set to miss its 2020 targets by a large margin unless our future government acts decisively, which would mean a relatively fast phase out of coal. Shutting down half of the coal-fired power plants by 2020. So I think there's really a lot of stake right now at the coalition negotiations. So that's where a lot of the German NGOs are focused now, rightly so. Thinking a bit more medium to long term, I think a lot of the issues we raise in the letter are going to be important. Working on reform of the financial sector, so it's more climate friendly. Continuing the close cooperation with France. Thinking about a European investment agenda that will create new economic opportunities for people in Europe in a climate-friendly way. So I think there's lots to do for us and for our governments in the next years to decades.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we come nearly to an end. Let me make 3 statements. Well, first, thank you very much to our graphic recorder who has produced this graph and which can be downloaded. You find it on #TalanoaSpace later on. Let me thank again to Jochen Flasbarth and Madame Poirson, and it was very, very hard for us to coordinate that they will be here at the same time, and Fiji changed place with us, so it was great that they were here for 30 minutes. They would have stayed longer if they could have done so. And third of all, thank you to Neil and Lutz and all the participants of the fishbowl session. And before I forget it, at 6:30, I think we'll have again the daily Talanoa, where we'll have the direct connection between the Bula zone and the Bonn zone. And there's somebody coming who is laughing. Because you like the Daily Talanoa. So it's really a live update about the negotiations with one journalist and 2 or 3 experts who have taken part in the negotiations. Please feel free to come back at 6:30. And now a great applause to all of us and enjoy the COP.